Right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Elevenses again, the topical news, controversial views and biking tips show. It's Easter Sunday, isn't it? 12th of April. And you're live with Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's another beautiful day in London. This is one of the best springs I can remember for quite a few years. And of course, it'd be lovely to be out there on the bikes. But hey ho, we are locked down. So we'll try to bring you some interesting news and views from around the world. What have we got today for you? Well, first of all, the Indian bike manufacturer Hero is launching a design competition. I'll talk about that a bit in a moment. NHS workers are finding their bikes are being stolen. So after we've talked about that, we'll talk about checking security. And then finally, will cover biking fit and exercise bands, which I have just realised I've forgotten to put out. I was about to, they were my props for the morning, but I've left them elsewhere, so I'll have to go and grab them in a moment. Okay, stay tuned to the end if you can. If you can't, don't forget you can catch up later in the day. If you have anything to say at any point, drop me a line using the comment system here. I will get back to you at the end of the show when I get a moment to type. If you've got any suggestions for future shows, do drop me a line again. Nigel has also already suggested a tyre rotation for bikes that are parked up, which is a great idea, so I'll have a look at that tomorrow. Okay, all right, just before we get on to the biking stuff, something that I've been struggling with for the last few days on the PC is that it's my desktop has been running like a slug, and I've also had some program crashes, which doesn't normally happen. Now, okay, I did the usual antivirus sweeps and I'd look at all that kind of thing, and one of the things I did find that although the PC was clear, the CPU was running pretty much flat out, and it seemed to be one browser, one process within Windows hogging the CPU cycles. So now the desktop PC is powered by an old Intel Atom, so it's a bit steam powered by modern standards, but it's always run pretty effectively for just web browsing and doing my general writing kind of stuff. I wouldn't use it for video processing, but it's okay for sort of non-intensive stuff. But whatever it was, this issue was actually crippling the PC. Now, what I noticed was that it all went away at the moment I closed the browser. So okay, I thought maybe it's a problem with the browser, so let's have a try installing an alternative. And I tried a couple of different browsers, and I found they made no difference at all. Now, what I noticed was that, of course, virtually all the browsers on the market these days, including Microsoft Edge, are Chromium based. So I wondered if that was a problem. So I happen to have a copy of a very old portable browser called Chameleon. It's been around for a while, and it runs on the old Gecko rendering engine, which probably won't mean very much to most of you, but basically it means it's not Chrome. And it worked okay, flew along. So to cut a long 4-day story of fiddling with the computer short, it seemed to be Chrome that was a problem. And when I had a look at the version data, it appeared that there was a full number update, a full version update 4 or 5 days ago. And I wondered if that could be the problem. So I actually rolled back to the previous version, previous number update, reinstalled, fired it all up again, and it seems to be problem solved. It's Chrome's never particularly rapid, but we're back to where we were a few weeks ago. So that's my problem solved on my desktop. And the reason I'm saying this is we're all spending probably a lot more time on computers than we would do normally. So if anybody is running an older PC and has had problems with their browser, that could be it. All right, so just have a think about maybe rolling back to an earlier version. Okay, now on to bikes. So, all right, during the lockdown period, what we've seen already is a number of manufacturers have come up with some innovative ways to kind of stay in touch with their customer base. We've seen some online virtual launches of motorcycles, but Hero, who are one of the bigger Indian motorcycle manufacturers, have come up with something a little bit of interest. They are launching what they're calling an artistic initiative during lockdown. The title is, just read that, Hero Collabs the Design Challenge. And basically what they're asking for is input from anyone. That could be followers of the brand, it could be students, it could be professionals within the graphics industry. And they want everybody to show off their creativity by designing graphics for a range of which might go onto the bikes or could be used for t-shirts and clothing. so what does the winner get? Well, one of the Hero XP Pulse 200. So it's not going to set the world alight, but nice little prize there for someone. The press release is in slightly confusing language, almost but not quite English, I'd say. So I think what they're saying is that those wishing to take part can join the challenge on the let's read the website address, motocorp.com, or their microsite, which is herocolabs.com. Final date for submission is the 21st of April, so you've got just over a week to get on with that if you are interested. And then it seems, again, just reading the press release was a little bit tricky. I think they're going to choose 50 designs, put those up to vote. The top ones that get voted up by the people, the public, will then be finally judged by Hero themselves, and then obviously they may be using your design on the product, which would be fine, wouldn't it? Okay, so just to remind you where you are, you're watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills, and still to come, I'm going to talk in a little bit about the NHS bikes being stolen and some security ideas if you are still using your bike, or even if you're not. And then we'll finish the show with some keep fit advice. Okay, so all right, now I'm just going to have to do a little fiddle on the computer here, so just bear with me for a moment. I mentioned earlier that there have been some fatal crashes. I think I mentioned that there were 3 by the time of the Wednesday's show. Well, there are more happening out there, unfortunately. There was a fatal accident involving a motorcycle and a bus in Lewisham on Friday. So, do take care. And there also do seem to be some people who are out on bikes taking jollies, unfortunately. A group were dispersed in Hearts. They seemed to have been using off-road bikes in a quarry. No doubt they thought that was perfectly all right, but they'd come out from London and the police took a fairly dim view and sent them back. That's the one report I read. There was a second weirder story, actually, very odd one, this one. I first saw it in the Mirror, but it also appeared in a number of papers, and it got picked up abroad as well, which is interesting. Now, what the story basically was all about was that a group of bikers had supposedly been dispersed in Yorkshire, where they'd gathered together to apparently hold a vigil for a rider who died in a collision earlier this week. Now, the story came with some photographs of some people standing outside a Tesco store, and they were standing beside some flowers on the railing. So, obviously it has been a crash there. But the more I looked at those photos, the less it looked to me like it was actually a group of bikers. And it looked just more to me like a photo from just a few days ago, before social distancing came in, but when there were still queues at supermarkets. Everybody was standing very close together. There was one person in the queue wearing a mask, which, as I say, suggests that it was possibly a queue just before the lockdown came in. But there was no one in bike gear, no one carrying a helmet, and in fact, most of the people there didn't actually look like bikers at all. There were people pushing buggies and in casual clothes. Now, as I say, this story appeared in several different papers, online papers, including the Mirror. So I had a look around, see if I could find a source story for this. Now, generally speaking, the police will provide a press release, and that's where the stories will be picked up from. Now, I'm not saying it was fake news, but I couldn't find a press release from the police in Yorkshire about this. So I'm not convinced the story is actually true. If anybody knows different, do let me know and I'll put out a correction. But, we just have to be on our guard all the time, because there are some weird stories out there. Now, I've just put a photo of a bike up. I put up a little bit earlier than I meant to, but hey ho. I've heard through various fire and rescue sources that bikes are being stolen from NHS workers. And that's the first one, that banana yellow ER6N. The registration number is MX56TXU. It's apparently got a very loud exhaust, and the owner says that it had some bungee straps over the grab rail too. Now, it was stolen from Queenborough, which is up on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, and there was a possible sighting later that day in Betherston, which is down near Ashford, so about 25 miles away, also in the same county. That was reported stolen yesterday, Easter Saturday. Now, again, I'm just going to put the next pick up. So again, bear with me for a second while I do a bit of fiddling. This is all a little bit fiddlier than I would like it to be, but we're getting there. So have a look at that one. That is stolen. I'm not quite sure where it was stolen to get that information, but this is the appeal that went out with it. This was disappeared on Easter Friday. The bike's owned by a blood scientist working for the NHS, so he's got a fairly important role. And he says, "May I take the liberty in asking for some help? I'm an NHS blood scientist and I have to work nights and over the weekends. With the lockdown, I have to rely on my only means of transport, this being my motorbike. Can you look out for it, please? It's a Triumph Sprint 955i in British Racing Green. The bike has two very large, distinctive Givi panniers." He said, "I don't give a shit who took it. I just want it back so I can get into work. Thanks for your help. It's appreciated." So, again, do keep an eye open for those. If you do see anything, give the police a bell. They might well take an interest in retrieving a bike from an NHS worker. Right, okay, so where are we now? Well, we're at the midpoint of the show. You're watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams. Don't forget, my paperbacks are still on offer. You can pick those up from my publisher. And so if you can't ride, you can at least read. Okay, we'll be going on to biking fitness in just a moment. But for the time being, let's have just a quick look at some security issues. Now, just go back to that second photo. Just have a quick look at the lock on the front of that bike. Now, I do apologize to the owner for using it as an example, but if that is the kind of security that he's using, it looks like a little bicycle lock there on the front wheel, then, you know, really the security's a bit short on deterrent value. Okay, so what can we do to try to keep our bike safe and sound at the moment? Well, the first thing I'll say is that the trackers probably aren't a great deal of use right at this moment. You know, they rely on the control room detecting your bike's moved. And okay, if it's just been wheeled around the corner, you might be able to wander around there and push it back again before anybody does anything serious to it. But chances are, if it's disappeared any distance, then the police really aren't going to be taking an interest, would be my guess at this moment, in getting it back for you. So I wouldn't place too much faith in a tracker. Similarly, bike marking technologies like data tag and smart water are all very well. You know, they will identify your bike as belonging to you, but it's all after the event, and you need somebody to find it and you know, work out that it doesn't belong to whoever's saying it's theirs. And alarms as well. If there's nobody on the street, then an alarm going off in the middle of a car park probably is going to be even less use in attracting attention and working as a deterrent than they normally are. So essentially, I'd suggest that your strategies on bike security should be looking at two directions at the moment. First of all, concealment, and the second being inconvenience. If you can park the bike somewhere out of sight, that's great, because if it's out of sight, it's not likely to be seen and it's not likely to be a target. You have to be a little bit careful though, because if you put it somewhere where it's concealed from everybody, then you also give the thief an opportunity to work in concealment. So there's sort of a balance to be found there. But if you can lock it up somewhere, or rather put it in somewhere where there's locked access to prevent somebody getting to it, that would be ideal. Something like a locked car park, maybe with a security guard or something, that would be fantastic. So if you can do that, that's great. So see if you can get access to a locked car park. That'd be the first thing I'd suggest. If you can't do that, then put the bike out of sight by using a bike cover. But a couple of tips: make sure that it's actually locked to the bike, and try and lock it front and rear so that somebody can't just come along and lift the cover easily to see what's under it. It's, it makes it just a little bit more difficult to know what the bike is and whether it's worth bothering with. Now, bike covers tend to be fairly bulky things. They tend to get wet when it rains. They tend to be awkward to carry. But frankly, for the couple of minutes it takes to remove and put back on every time you ride and then park the bike up, and for the cost of a sort of a cargo net or something over the rear seat to carry it with you, it would be worth the investment, in my opinion. It won't cost you nearly as much as the inconvenience, unfortunately, of coming out and finding your bike isn't there anymore. Okay, after that, try to make it as difficult and time consuming for the thief as possible. Now, far too many riders, and I hold my hand up sometimes as being guilty of this myself, far too many people rely on their steering locks and immobilizers, factory immobilizers. Now, the average steering lock can be broken by a moderately strong person just giving the bars a big tweak. They're really not very resistant at all, generally speaking. And once you've broken the steering lock, then the bike can generally be wheeled away. And then, of course, out of sight, it can be dealt with by the thief. Likewise, once the steering lock's broken, the immobilizer is not going to do anything, is it? It's just going to stop somebody riding it off. So once it's out of sight, then other steps can be taken by the thief. And one of the things that can be done with factory immobilizers is that they can be reprogrammed or replaced. So again, they're not long-term secure. They'll stop a typical scrope from riding the bike away, but they won't stop it being stolen in the first place. So you really do need some physical security, and you need something that stops the bike being moved if you possibly can. Now, if you're using a padlock, remember that padlock technology was invented by the Romans. It's 2,000 years old, and that means we've had 2,000 years how to break them. The Romans could break padlocks, so it's no great surprise to discover they're not necessarily as secure as we think they are. 2 millennia on, and far too many security devices are nothing of the sort, really. I've covered the issues before with many locks that are labelled up with what look like impressive credentials, Salt Secure badges and things like that, and chains that apparently resist bolt croppers, but when they're actually tested, they do as good a job of keeping the bolt croppers out as a 2-week-old piece of EDAM, quite frankly. Some years ago, I featured an Oxford Titan lock that was being described as having a toughened steel construction. Anyway, biker security expert broke the lock in literally just a second or two with a pair of bolt cutters. Hardly had to put any effort into it. And when he looked at the metal, he said it was actually metal called a nickel alloy, which is notoriously brittle. So it wasn't secure at all, really. Dodgy advertising too. But if you've got one, at least use it. Even a crappy, cheap disc lock is better than nothing. It will take a few moments to break. So bung as many of those on as you can. If you've got a shackle lock, stick it through the forks if you can, through the back wheel if you can. Anything that secures the bike and makes it difficult to wheel away will slow things down. Front and rear, if you can do both, again, that means somebody can't lift one end up and wheel it off with the other wheel on the ground. Even a heavyweight chain, though, won't stop two blokes with scaffolding poles lifting the bike into the back of a truck. So try securing it if you possibly can, something that makes it all the more awkward to move. Daisy chaining locks together, so you've got two locks from different bikes is a good technique. Each person can individually unlock their own bike, but it means that it just makes it a little bit more awkward for people to get in there and break the lock. But try not to leave the lock itself lying on the ground. If you've got it on the ground, the problem is that the ground then presents you with a hard surface that you can chop against the lock. Much easier to attack that way. You won't stop a pro with any security. A pro will get that bike if they really want it. But looking at the two bikes that I've just showed you, I think it's fairly unlikely they were stolen by pros. I suspect they were both stolen by, just ne'er-do-wells. Okay, so we're coming up to the fifth part of the show, my fourth story. Don't forget, you can join me for Elevenses every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So we'll be back tomorrow, Easter Monday, at 11 BST. And if you can catch up with me on YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, don't forget the UK on the end. That would be great. Right. I'm just going to go and get my prop. Hang on a moment. Right, it's nothing like being prepared properly. Okay, so final story this week. I just wanted to continue the theme of staying biking fit, so that we're ready to get back out on the bikes when the lockdown ends. Now, why is this so important? Well, the answer is partly that riding a bike is actually harder work than most people think. We actually, it's definitely more difficult or more physically exercising than driving a car when you think about it. If you're riding a sports bike, for example, you're supporting a lot of your body weight against gravity. Ideally, we don't do it against the bars, but ideally we're doing it through our back and our knees against the tank. We're also using the muscles against the forces of acceleration and deceleration. In a car seat, you're sitting in a bucket seat, and you're also restrained to some extent by a seat belt. So it's gravity that holds you in the seat, and you really don't need to do very much other than hold the steering wheel and use the pedals in a car. But a motorcycle actually requires quite a lot more physical effort, and that physical effort runs through our legs, up our back into our shoulders, through the neck, because we're supporting the weight of our head. Now, the head is a heavy part of the body, and down the arms, shoulders, into the top of the arm, forearm, and eventually wrists and fingers. Now, on the first talk I did, I mentioned the use of a wrist exerciser. If we're riding regularly, of course, then we actually tend to build up these muscles, and we build up the strength that we need to ride the bike almost without noticing it. The only time you really spot this is when you actually change bike style dramatically. I remember getting off my GSXR, which I've been riding steadily for a year or so, and onto a BMW. It was an R100 GS, if you recall those bikes. And I thought that would be nice and comfy for a long trip across from Las Vegas to the Rocky Mountains. I thought it'd be a fantastic bike to ride. How wrong could I be? That nice, upright, easy riding position nearly killed me. I sort of basically not considered the wind factor of a virtually naked bike compared with the fully fed GSXR, which kept the wind off. There were other problems as well, like the leg position wasn't what I was used to as well. So it all put a lot of strain on the body. And I can remember getting off the bike after the first day's riding, which was 200 miles and I could barely walk. I mean, I was seriously crippled. Over the course of the following week, I rode the bike and did 3,000 miles on it or something in a week. We did a lot of miles. And the final day, we rode back all the way from the Rockies to Las Vegas. It was over 600 miles, that particular trip. And we did it in one hit. Actually, I got off the bike at the end of that and I was reasonably fit. But anyway, as I say, so we don't notice that we've been getting a workout while we've been riding. And so it very often after a bit of a break, it's that first ride that shows up that we've actually lost a bit of fitness and flexibility in those muscles. Now, generally speaking, the younger you are, the less likely this is to be a problem. But, you know, with some of us who are not quite so young as we used to be, it's more of an issue. And even younger riders, as I said, will probably notice their wrists aching when they get back. So, yeah, last week was the wrist exerciser. But second suggestion I have for you is get hold of some what are called resistance bands. Now, these are very simple. There's one. It's just basically a bit of stretchy rubber. That's all it is. You can get more complex ones. You can get sort of tubes with handles that are built in at either end, but they all do the same thing. As you stretch them out, they resist the pull, and so the muscles on each arm are exercised as you pull it. Okay, so simple as that. Usually when you buy something like this, it will come with a little pack of exercises or instruction guide on how to use them, or you can head to the internet and you'll find plenty of people exercising using these. As I said, I'm not going to threaten you by demonstrating wearing a leotard. You can put that one right out of your minds, but you can easily find the right sort of exercises. You don't need a full-on gym to use things like this. Basically, I did a lot of exercises a couple of years ago to get my legs back into shape, simply sitting in front of the TV in the evening. So what I think we'll say, though, about these is that, like a lot of things, the best results come from little and reasonably frequently. But regularly is important. People often make the mistake with things like this of exercising too hard. Now, you'll notice I've actually got two of these. If you look closely, you'll actually see they're different thicknesses. And what that means is this one is actually much tougher to stretch. And you can get these in all sorts of grades to the point where, you know, they're barely movable. What people tend to do with all this kind of stuff is pick the toughest one because they're hard, and then they try and work with that. And what they end up doing is actually straining muscles. Just basically, you're not trying to win a weightlifting competition here. We are just trying to do some repetitive exercise to keep muscles flexible and to keep them sort of maintained rather than building lots of extra strength. So don't overdo it. Remember, little and often is the answer. So something as simple as these exercise bands, these resistance bands, will give you some, you know, a decent workout to maintain body strength. All right. Okay. So that's just about it for the today. The show will be back tomorrow. Elevenses will be back tomorrow with more news, views, and tips. In the meantime, don't forget to check out my regular Better Biking posts on my Facebook page. And we'll also have an item tomorrow when we're back on Easter Monday. I will be looking at doing how to keep the tyres in good order while the bike's parked up. But for now, thank you all for watching. And hopefully we'll catch you next time out. So, okay, from Kevin Williams, Survival Skills, thank you and goodbye till tomorrow.